What's up, YouTube? We're in the truck again today and got a question. How do I wear all the different hats that I wear? Meaning, how do I cycle through all the different requirements that I have, relationships that I have, commitments that I have? For those that are unaware, I am a father, I am a husband, I am a son, I am an ordained pastor. I live in an intentional community. I have 5 businesses, 2 ministries, and live on a homestead. So, I don't know, there's 13-ish things there, 15-ish things. And they all require something different. Everything is a slightly different touch. And so, approaching each different thing, whether it's business or ministry or home life or homestead or fellowship with the people that I love in our tribe, it's really important for me to understand the context of this encounter or conversation that we're about to have. So much so that because we're what we call spaghetti, we're enmeshed. There are people who are in multiple different organizations. Like, for example, we have people in Refuge Medical that we also do Bible study with and do life with, that will also deploy with Grindstone Ministries after a hurricane or tornado. And so that's 3 different buckets right there. And that perhaps because we have the context with one another, will seek me out for biblical advice in a pastoral role. So that's 4 different relationships that we could have right there. So when they come to me, one of the things that I have conditioned people to do for my own sake and for the sake of the conversation is to tell me, and a lot of people don't want to tell you what it's about before they talk to you. That drives me nuts. Hey brother, can I get an hour of your time? Yeah, for what? Well, I just want to talk. About what? And that sounds selfish, but I need to know how to prioritize this interaction. What are we talking about? If it's pastoral, I'll find time right now. If it's about grindstone stuff and we're in between tornado and hurricane seasons, how's your next week look? If it's business stuff, well, is it a business day? Because if it's Shabbat, I'm not going to talk to you about business today. If you got a question about Bible study, you see what I mean? And so knowing what we're talking about, do yourself a favor when you reach out to people, give them the broad brushstrokes of what you want to discuss. You don't have to give them all the details, but that way they have a mental expectation of what the conversation is going to be about so that they can prepare for it. So people will reach out to me and say, hey brother, can we talk? Sure. About what? They'll tell me. And then even when we get there, I want to confirm. Hey, this is what we're talking about, right? And what you'll find is when you're spaghetti, when you have a lot of overlap, that the conversation is probably 80% about the thing that they wanted to talk about and 20% about everything else too, unless you have highly disciplined people. But it's to the benefit of both parties that we know what bucket we're in, what hat we're wearing before we begin this conversation, so we can mutually respect one another's boundaries. And that's really what we're talking about here, is boundaries in between personal life, spiritual life, professional life, ministry work, etc., etc. So I want to know what hat to wear before we even begin the conversation. Switching between them, for me, very much so looks like time blocking, which is something that I don't think a lot of people do, right? You don't prioritize your schedule, you schedule your priorities, that kind of standard cliche entrepreneurial bullcrap. There's some truth to that, but you have to get to the point where you have enough recurring revenue that you have the ability to shift from being reactive to proactive. Once you shift to proactive, now I get to tell my schedule what it looks like rather than my schedule telling me what my day looks like. And it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point where I can decide what my schedule looks like, not the other way around. But I'll time block stuff out. Like content creation for Bear Independent happens at very specific times each week. When I go to the Refuge office to touch base both at a tactical and a strategic level, what's tactical? What, what's our inventory look like? How quickly are orders being fulfilled? What do we have going on with R&D, with the sew shop, etc.? What's strategic? Okay, how does our content planning look? What strategic partnerships are we engaged in? What's the timeline? What's the horizon to fulfillment on these things? The products that we're developing, when are we looking to launch them, etc., etc., etc. That's strategic level stuff. When I show up at the office to have those conversations, which is important, we'll come back around to that. When I show up at the office to have those conversations, I'm in that bucket. Now, I have a lot of different buckets, a lot of different hats. And so some of the people who are there at Refuge may also have questions about life. Hey, boss, what do you think about this? Or, shalom, pastor. Okay, even that, how I'm addressed in that situation can determine the context with which we're about to have this conversation. Merging. And so we're in Paris, Texas, by the way. Not for long, though. We're just passing through. We're doing a little road trip thing. Oh, my gosh, Bear, are you on the bypass? Not yet. About to be. What are you doing there? Stuff. Which gets back to travel. Okay, I'm traveling. Multitasking when you're scheduling, when you're planning your schedule out. I'm doing business while I'm in the truck. I'm making content while I'm in the truck, which gets back to like lines of effort. Very rarely do I do a thing where this line of effort checks one box, unless it's something like going on a family vacation, in which case, don't call me unless literally something's on fire or literally somebody's about to die. Other than that, I will talk to you when I get back. That's one line of effort. That's all I'm concerned about. And there's a point to that too. When you're with family, be with family. What if you run a family business? Then you need to have clear boundaries. From 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., business is on. After 6 p.m., unless something's on fire or somebody's bleeding, unless it's catastrophic, we'll talk about business tomorrow. And whatever your boundaries look like, that's your business. I'm a 9 to 5 guy, or from 10 to 4, or whatever. You know the flow of your life better than I do by a mile. For me, 6 to 6. And so, but where do I get my personal time? Where do you wear your personal time hat? Before 6 a.m.? Because after 6 p.m. is family time. See what I mean? And so, wearing all these different hats, shifting gears from one to the next to the next. Sometimes with the same people in the same conversation, we got to talk about different things. And I will literally say the phrase, hey, let's shift gears. Let's move this, because I have a mental image of I'm moving from one thing to the next. And I need that. I'm highly visual. It helps me when we delineate between one thing and the next and the next. It also requires a high level of professionalism, a high level of discipline with the people that you're doing life with, to let business be business and personal be personal. You don't get to run around offended at somebody for very long in an intentional community, let alone in business or in ministry, before that shit catches up with you, because it bleeds over from one to the next. All those negative emotions bleed over from one to the next, which means we have to have a higher level of discernment when we're talking with one another. When I commit to let business be business, I'm actually doing everybody, including myself, a favor. That my personal feelings aren't going to get in the way of business decisions. Your personal feelings aren't going to get in the way of business decisions. We're going to do what's best for the business in this context, righteously, morally, ethically. Because if the business folds, 26 people lose their source of income. 26 people whom high likelihood I'm also going to see at Bible study, right? And so there's a certain amount of societal pressure there, which is a good thing, regardless of what today's day and age might teach us. Societal pressure applied righteously is a good thing, that we're all conducting ourselves professionally when it's time to be professional. And then when you have that clear delineation, 6:01 p.m., hey man, you want to drink a bourbon on the porch? Just hang out? And to be able to shift gears from one to the next. And so so much of it comes back to intentionality. The hat that you're wearing, the bucket you're in, when it's time to make content, you make content. When it's time to do your business calls, you do your I call it biz dev, business development. When I got to do my calls, I do my calls. When I got to jump on a guy's podcast or a girl's podcast, I'm podcasting now. When I have to do dad stuff, I do dad stuff. When I have to do wife stuff, husband stuff with my wife, I do husband stuff with my wife. Whatever that may be. And how I address even the timbre of my voice changes subtly. The intonation that I use changes subtly depending on which hat I'm wearing, which bucket I'm in, because I don't get to talk to my wife for very long the way I talk to my brothers when we're doing Caleb House stuff or when we're on a grindstone deployment, right? Have you ever been on grindstone deployment and you've heard my radio voice? Or you've been at the 8 p.m. meetings the night before when we're doing, pod plan of the day for the following day? That's a different bear than I am with my wife. And it doesn't mean I'm two-faced. It means I'm multifaceted and I have enough emotional awareness, enough emotional maturity in order to understand the context with which I'm talking to people. Somebody has a Bible question. Well, who's the somebody? 17-year-old kid is different than a 35-year-old man, which is different than an 80-year-old woman. So the intentionality and the awareness is requisite in my mind. It's something that we must have. I'll also tell you this. I don't recommend, for everybody who's listening, I don't recommend that any normal human being, and I am abnormal, I'm admitting that, in good ways and bad ways, that any abnormal human being have 5 businesses and 2 ministries, especially when the ministry side, if we're being honest with one another, is a life's work. How do you do that? Because if you half-ass any of it, it's going to fall apart. It's not going to be successful. Well, the way that I've done it to this point is by having awesome teams of highly qualified, highly motivated people to execute in the tactical and at the strategic levels across what we call the organization, the enterprise, the 5 businesses, the 2 ministries. Because as already stated, some of them share personnel. Grindstone is a volunteer ministry. Well, those volunteers got to come from somewhere. And because of the quality of people I do life with, a lot of those volunteers are us. Praise the Most High. That's awesome. But you shouldn't, learn from my mistake. You shouldn't do 7 things at the same time. And the last year or so of my life has been much more so trying to figure out how to give away as much as possible of those 7 things rather than maintain my control over those 7 things out of ego and hubris. Because it's a losing proposition to think that your 1/7 of effort is going to be as good or better than anybody else's whole effort to be able to succeed in 2024. It's a losing proposition. Now I find myself in an interesting place in life where I scattered seed across all these different facets, and all that seed has grown. And what I don't want to happen is that seed gets choked out by weeds because we don't pay enough attention to it because of a lack of stewardship. And I am being forced to take a hard look at how I conduct myself to prioritize the most important things. And if you got 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 things going on, reminder to you and to me, the most important ministry that you have is your family. because you will answer at the end of an age for how well you protected, provided for, and blessed your household. Because your wife was a daughter of Elohim before she was your wife. Your children belong to Elohim before they belong to you, and they're going back to Elohim when you become worm food. And so you only have them for a period of time, which in the history of earth is a very short period of time. And it requires the intentionality to prioritize those relationships first above everything else that's vying for your attention, with all the pressures of being a man, to be a good father, be a good husband, be a provider, be a protector, be a teacher, to be productive, to be fulfilled, to walk in righteousness, all these pressures that a man has. The answer to all those things are your wife and your kids. If your motivation is to steward your wife and your children in a way that puts a smile on the father's face, even if you have lower income than if you were entirely dedicated to your startup business or whatever else it might be, if you're missing that, none of the other shit matters. Now, that'll lead into work-life balance, which is a fallacy as far as I'm concerned. I'm the last person on earth to ask about work-life balance, because my job as president and CEO of all these different organizations across the enterprise is to run from one fire to the next to the next. And what I've learned in 23 years of entrepreneurship is don't let your family catch fire. Your family shouldn't be one of those things that's on fire that you have to run back to. Preemptively tend that garden. If that's the one raised bed in your garden that's beautiful, you're winning in life. But it requires that commitment, that discipline, that intentionality to spend the requisite time on the most important things, knowing that the Father will provide on all the other fronts. In the words of Messiah, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and then all these things will be added unto you. Work first on putting a smile on the Father's face, being a good dad, a good husband, a good brother. And then all these other things will be added unto you. And especially in entrepreneurship, man, we get so wrapped around the axles, me included, because I'm a high speed of implementation guy. Got to get it done right now. Do it right now. Do it right now. Yeah, but the older I get, the more true it rings in my life. Stimulus, pause, response. Whether that pause is a few minutes before you send that angry text message, or call somebody up and give them a piece of your mind, or a few hours before you reply to that email, or a few days before you make that really important business decision. At least sleep on it and pray on it before your ego gets wrapped up in this situation. Being a high speed of implementation person, being incredibly stubborn, what the world calls tenacious in a positive light, it has served me well in my latter years to just pause a minute and think, what are the ramifications of my actions going to be if I take COA A, COA B, COA C, rather than running headlong into a brick wall because I wanted to move quickly. What does it gain a man if he gains the world? Or what does it profit a man if he gains the world and loses his soul? So, as far as wearing all these different hats, the best piece of advice I can give is intentionality. You have to be intentional with each one of the different hats. And the average human being probably has 3 to 5 different hats they have to wear without even realizing it. Being a child, and being a spouse, and being a parent, and being an employee or the boss, and then being part of a faith group, whatever that might look like for you, that's 5 right there. And your context determines that subtle shift in your demeanor and your tenor, how you speak, how you act, instinctively for many people, so much so in some cases you're not even aware of it. Start becoming more aware of it and lean into that, and you're actually respecting yourself and everybody else when you draw hard boundaries between those things, It enables us better to operate in righteousness when we let business be business, ministry be ministry, family be family, faith be faith, at least from a leadership standpoint. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but off the cuff, it's what I've got to say about it. If you have further questions related to this, hit me in the YouTube comments, let me know. I appreciate y'all deeply. Of course, you know, all the links to everything we do is in the description, and you can find them at bearindependent.com as well. Y'all have a blessed day. Shalom.